Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 148. I'm your host, Sabasa J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, we're going to be doing our recap on the Canadian Nationals that we just played. We're also going to be talking about our meta predictions for PT Vegas and the ban list that comes in effect for this Pro Tour. The last thing that has happened is CanNats, so let's just go straight into that. How was your Canadian Nationals, and how was your trip before we go into any of the games itself?
My trip was okay. I was kind of still getting over a cold for Canadian Nationals. I was largely better, but I had a bit of a lingering cough and the hotel room was super dry. So my sleep was kind of awful. I'd have trouble falling asleep, sleep for an hour or two, wake up, can't fall back asleep for another hour, sleep an hour or two, wake up for an hour. So it was not great in that sense. The events went pretty solid though. The battlegrounds, I bubbled. Well, I came in 10th. I lost to Jay, which put me out of contention for the cut, but I came in 10th with a 60 record on Acilio. I played Canadian Nationals. I went 4-3 day one. I lost my last two draft rounds. I think that those were definitely fatigue from not really sleeping and making some mistakes in my games that were, I think they were both pretty winnable. So a little unfortunate there. And then I ended X4 on Nationals. 27th. No min cash.
Unfortunate. It was pretty hot, right? Like the first couple of days that we were there.
Yeah.
I think we were right in the middle of the heat wave. And man, it was miserable to go outside.
It was pretty awful. So yeah, my Nationals, I fell a little short of the battlegrounds. Nationals, I felt like I could have done well, but made some mistakes at the end of day one. And then I played the WCQ. I didn't want to play the WCQ because I hadn't prepped that much Sage, or any Sage really, but I decided to play. I played Briar. I went 7-0 Swiss and eventually lost in finals to Michael Metallo, who I'd beaten in the last round of Swiss, but he beat me in the finals when it mattered more. So congrats to Michael. But yeah, I was pretty happy to do so well with not a lot of reps. I will be writing about this Briar deck at some point. It may not be until after Vegas because I also want to write about the Acilio deck and I also have an article for LSS. So yeah, well, it'll come out, but I don't know exactly when.
Okay. It is it's very similar to some of the lists that we've been talking to in the Discord anyways, right?
Yeah, if you go to the Silver Age section, it's I have a list posted and I think it's basically exactly that list or maybe one card different. And I think after playing the list, I might change one or two cards, but I don't think it's anything major from anything super different from what's been posted already.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess for myself, I also played the Battlegrounds, and as Yuki said, I beat her in round 7. So then I ended up beating Victor on round 8. Sorry, Victor the person. He was on Acilio. So I did go 7-1 for the top 8 at the Battlegrounds. I ended up losing in the top 4 game, so my run ended there. I was on Arachne Huntsman. I think the deck was actually really well positioned for this event, and I think it was really well positioned for CanNats in general. There were very little victors in the room. I thought there would be a lot more victors. Man, there was not that many people playing Victor in CanNats. I think there were 3-ish players near the top tables that I could have paired into during CanNats, but that's not 10 of them, right? So I think it was actually a good choice for this event.
Yeah, I think Victor, my memory is that Victor had okay representation, but I think was mostly at the lower tables, which...
Yeah, I was talking with a couple of people who brought Victor, but look, their experiences were either that they started off hot and they're 3-0 going into CanNats, or they're 0-3 going into CanNats. Not that much in the middle there.
Yeah. It did seem like there was a handful that did really well and a bunch that didn't. So congrats on making top 8 of the Battlegrounds. How did CanNats itself go for you?
CanNats for me, it was pretty good day one. I started day one with X&2 record. So I ended up with an X&2 record. I started 3-1 in constructed, and my draft I went 2-1, so pretty reasonable honestly for the deck that I brought. And then day 2, it was quite bad. I don't know what it was, but I think I played pretty pretty badly in my first. Actually, in all three games, I think I played pretty badly, and then I ended up with a record of 6-4 for I think 30th place. So I also bubbled out of the cash. I needed one more win. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I deserved any of those wins. So it's like I don't know what it was because like I slept so well the day before, and then I got to the venue. I was like pretty awake, and then I started playing my game, and then I think halfway through the first game, I just like kind of caught myself not being focused, and then
Right.
I just like lost the game by a couple of points, and then went to the next round, and then I made some like outrageous misplay, and I lost by exact lethal against an Acilio, and then the third match was my cards lined up very well, so it was that was unfortunate for my opponent, but I don't think I played that game well either. So I don't know. I just didn't play well in day two of the Can Nats.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Happens. It's kind of how I felt day one. Well, actually, I felt like I played well until the last two rounds, and then I felt like I stopped playing well. So definitely happens. Okay, so that was our experience at Canadian Nationals. We won't really go too much into the top eight and everything, but congrats to Kevin Constantino for taking it out on Acilio. Um, I guess before we move into all the Nationals data and the other topics heading towards PT Vegas, let's do a quick Patreon shout out. So thank you so much to all of the patrons who get back to the show. We couldn't be doing what we're doing without you. You kind of make this show possible. So thank you for giving back. And if you're interested, you can find us at patreon.com/onthebobble. There's a few different tiers. The crack bobble and holiday bobble tiers give you options to give just a little bit back and show your support. The titanium bobble tier gives you access to all the regular content that gets posted. There is a Syndra list that has seen quite good results over the national season posted up there. I will be adding Acilio shortly and Briar down the road, and probably my PT deck as well. I just don't know what it is at the moment. But yeah, all of that is coming. And if you're interested in that, you can check that out there. There's also some options for coaching at the higher tiers that give you a monthly coaching session. If you're also somebody that's not able to get back to the show, but you're a regular listener, we also appreciate you a lot. It was nice chatting with people at Canadian Nationals. Quite a few people came up, and yeah, thank you for tuning in, listening. We're glad that you get value out of the show and that you enjoy it. If you're looking to buy singles, consider purchasing from invasioncnc.ca. They sponsor the show, and you can use code YLB5 for 5% off all your singles at checkout. And that just lets them know that we sent you there and helps support us as well, and also helps you save 5% on your singles. So, yeah, that's it. But thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about nationals as a whole, right? So we had a national season, and let's talk about, I guess, start with the most converted decks in the format. There's gonna be three decks that I want to talk about here, which will be Acilio, Katsu, and Prism. Acilio with an 18% conversion rate across of all of the nationals combined, so including the smaller ones and the bigger ones. But 18% with 305 players registered across all nationals is a pretty impressive number. And this is going to be higher than the next biggest, which is Katsu at 16%, which only had 62 players registered, and Prism at also roughly 16%, with 63 players registered. So, Acilio best deck in the format right now? Do you think it's like well above every other deck in the format?
I think for nationals, Acilio was probably the best deck. Honestly, I mostly think that the God in a Flash version was really good. Similar to like what Caleb played at US Nationals or Imagine Bay played at US Nationals. That deck was really, really good. But there's the existence of this arcane deck, and so people don't know how to sideboard into you. So you kind of get a bunch of extra equity there where they can just like guess wrong or have a hedge board and be like slightly less optimal. Maybe they don't play as many D reacts into you just in case. So you can get lots of small edges there. And I think that deck's just really powerful. It's like one of the fastest aggro decks in the format. And surprisingly, it had a good Victor matchup. I think, and Victor was also like 304 registers, so just as represented as Acilio with 15% conversion. So just kind of like just barely in fourth there. So I think that Victor was actually a really big boon for this deck, where Acilio was good into Victor, and then Victor was good into a lot of the aggro decks that are good into Acilio. So decks like Katsu, Syndra, Dash.io, these decks are all not unwinnable for Acilio, but not decks you're hoping to see. But there are decks that Victor is very good into. So I think that Acilio was sort of in this position of like Victor cleaning up a lot of his bad matchups and then being good into Victor.
Okay, that makes sense. You're talking about the Acilio switchboard, but this actually is the most annoying part about Acilio, right? Like, so many of my games, I like present my deck, present my equipment. I have to present AB3. I have to put in my D reacts. And I have like Sync Belows and Fate Foreseens in my deck. And my opponent is like, present Storm Striders, and I'm like, I cannot arsenal these D reacts for the rest of this game because they play no attacks, and that I need to pitch them for one resource, which is like quite miserable in most scenarios. So and then you play against the attack variant of Acilio, where it's like the mono red line that plays like Ravenous Rabbles and Scar for Scars, and like if you don't have these red D reacts, you just get run over so fast, right? So it's not like you're not allowed to hedge away from either side either, right? Because if you present AB1 into Spell Acilio, you lose on the first like 4 turns of the game. And then you do the other way around and you bring AB3 and no D reacts against the attack variant. Man, they're attacking you for they attack you for four times every turn. So I think it's like super important in this format right now to like kind of like go around the table and then put decks with faces in the sense of like this Acilio player is playing this variant, this Acilio player is playing this variant. And then by the end of the tournament, you can kind of be like, oh, he's gonna be on Spell Acilio or Attack Acilio, whichever, however, I don't know how people call it nowadays, but it's a pretty big edge to be gained once you know which type of Acilio they're on.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. So yeah, those were the decks that converted the most. I guess honorable mentions to like Dash.io, Gravy Bone, Ziggy, Syndra, Valda, Vincent, Marionette, Kasai, all having solid representations and conversion rates above 10%. So they're kind of in that like 10 to 13% range, depending on the deck there. So all those decks were around, did well, but were a little bit below the rest of the pack.
I think those are all reasonable decks to be playing right now. I think we've seen all of these decks get some wins at Nats. And I think almost all these decks are decks that you can kind of expect to see going forth, right, from this Canadian Nationals. We have PT Las Vegas coming up. And those are going to be the decks that are going to be at the top of the meta for the next couple of months until the next set comes out. I think it's a pretty diverse format in the sense, right? Like, there's no decks that was like over 20% conversion rate. And like, this is a pretty long list of heroes to have more than 10% conversion rate.
Yeah, agreed. I think overall it's pretty diverse. Cecilia and Victor were in Prism until she allowed were definitely at the top. But yeah, lots of heroes you could play. And then if we look at nationals wins, like total number of wins, Acilio's the most winning with 7 wins, followed by Victor and Jarl at 6 wins. I think the Victor is not a surprise, but Jarl winning 6 nationals, I was personally not expecting this. I don't know about you.
I know, like, within some like smaller communities that people are like coming up on Yarrow. As Victor gets closer to LLing, I think Jarl is gonna be the next Guardian to be dominating the Guardian sphere. And I think the biggest thing though is that unlike Victor, Jarl has this like weakness of not having gold main estates, so they don't really have like the end game loop to crush these other fatigue decks. So you know what? I'm pretty happy that Victor is gone and Jarl is gonna be the next top guardian after Victor. But I think Jarl does have like the classic guardian strength, unlike Victor, where Victor feels like it's kind of reliant on the clashes, whereas Jarl's not reliant on the clashes, and you kind of get to play like I am the guardian, I block really well, I attack with big attacks with disruption every turn. Whereas Victor kind of just like outnumbers you more than send a bunch of big disruption turns.
Yeah, I think that's true. With the ice, Jarl gets quite a bit more disruption, playing like Winter's Bite, Channel Lake Frigid, and in some more aggressive decks, even playing cards like Frostfang. And especially once equipment's gone, giving them a Frostbite, whenever you play an ice card, can be quite tough. There's also a lot of red line decks right now, and Stalagmite sure is good against these aggro decks that are low on pitch. So I'm not surprised to see Jarl as the next Guardian. I just didn't think Jarl was going to pick up 6 wins with Victor still legal, because I think that matchup is playable. It depends a bit on the Victor deck and how much tech they have for the mirror, but from my understanding, it was kind of like one of the bad matchups for Jarl.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I'm interested to see how Jarl kind of like develops after Victor LLs though, because like once because Victor's gone now, it has enough wins. Victor's gone now. We're gonna be in this spot where now all of these red line deck has to respect these like frostbites. So whereas Victor kind of like suppressed these like red line decks by punishing them for attacking them, Yaro's gonna be in this like weird spot where they're trying to time walk. Yaro's trying to time walk these aggro decks now, right? So Yarrow being good now will make a lot of sense. Jarl beating Victors, I don't know if that was actually happening in these nationals. I have a feeling that like Victor was losing to other things, and then Jarl was like kind of like taking over and picking up the wins after Victor has lost somewhere in the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, but yeah, just definitely one to keep an eye on. I think, considering it did well with Victor still legal, and now Victor out of the way, just I think is a boon for that deck.
You know what it feels like? I was playing like the nationals, at Canadian nationals, and it kind of did feel like a matchup lottery to me this season, where there were like a lot of decks that, as a Huntsman player, I didn't want to see, and there were a lot of decks as the Huntsman players where I kind of just like wanted to pair into, and depending on like the name or the person who I got paired into, kind of determined if I was like clear favorite to win or like clear unfavored to win. Like it did feel a lot like matchup lottery and gem lottery in this format more than maybe like last year or a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think there's sort of like a combination of the meta being quite wide and then some of the matchups being pretty polarized as well that make it feel like this, where you kind of like can't cover all your bases. And most of the decks have at least a few things they're quite bad into. I think all the decks have a few things that they really just don't want to see. And yeah, it does feel a little bit more like that than we usually see. The meta also feels generally pretty like hyper aggro. You have like Phi, Katsu, Syndra, Acilio, Dashiel, all of these like really, really aggressive decks. And then you have like very defensive decks that are trying to kind of like put up the wall and make it hard for these aggro decks like Jarl, like Victor, like Arachne Huntsman. And there's a little bit in the in between, but not a whole lot.
Well, we did see Kasai come into the finals of the Canadian Nationals, which is like kind of the middle ground, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
aggressive but definitely defensive in terms of like block values.
Yeah, there's a little bit of decks that are in the kind of mid range category, but I would say it's like a little bit less than we've seen in the past for sure. I would say this is like quite an aggro meta with pretty hard control decks for the most part, and there's like a little bit of mid range, but not that much.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense. Once Victor leaves, though, it might open up a little bit more room for these mid range decks to kind of take over the format too, though, right? Because like I feel like the mid range deck's problem was that Victor was like just really good at blocking with 2 cards and then sending some like reasonably sized attack at you every turn, where the mid range deck just kind of couldn't keep up with that. But now that Victor's gone, maybe we'll see some development with some you know not as like red line decks as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to see how it goes. I feel like in my head the meta is still super aggro because Victor was like a bad matchup for a lot of these aggro decks, and I guess there's still Jarl. Maybe Jarl just performs a similar role. I'm not sure, but yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. I guess other things to mention from Nationals wins before we move on. Vincent and Ziggy and Puffin had 3 wins. These are heroes that I don't think came up previously, but are heroes that are present, have won some Nationals, and are worth keeping in mind as we head towards Vegas. I think all of these decks are still around. I think Victor leaving is quite good for actually all of them. Not to say that I think like Yarrow is going to be a walk in the park for these decks, but I think I think Clash of Bravado was really good into Vincent and Ziggy in particular. Um, and Puffin tends to have problems with fatigue, and we've talked about how good Victor is at fatigue. So yeah, these are 3 heroes to keep an eye on that I think probably get a little bit better with the Victor allow.
Yeah, that would make sense. And Vincent's been around for so long, is what it feels like, and it's such a like a different deck from all the other decks in the game. Vincent's nowhere near LLing though, right?
No, I don't think so. She's at 296, so yeah, she has quite a ways to go.
Wow, that's actually crazy. Vincent's I feel like Vincent's one of those heroes that's been like kind of in like the not the tier 1 bracket, but like always in this like tier 2 bracket that you have to kind of like, make sure that you have some kind of plan into, or you could just like randomly lose to this deck. I guess unless you're playing some aggro deck that just runs it over.
She's pretty good into aggro a lot of times. She plays like good small hands, has some disruption.
Man, what's the issue with Vincent then? I feel like Vincent's like a very, very powerful hero. Why is it not winning a lot more than it currently is?
I think Vincent's biggest issue is consistency. You kind of need like you kind of need like you need your rune chance to play your rune gate cards, so you have to draw those in like the right ratios. And if you don't draw like a rune gate card, you just have to banish a card from your hand. Anyways, to go to your turn if you want to play. So you just like basically lose a card. It turns into a rune champ, but you convert a card for 1 value, which is tough. And then the decks that are blocky kind of make you have very specific tools. You need like not only the rune chants, but probably some malefics and like the shadow non-attacks to enable Vincent and like probably get some action points somewhere. So there's kind of like a lot of moving parts. And the tools you need for the aggro decks are quite different than the tools that you need for the blocky decks. So you're kind of like pulled in a bunch of different directions, and it's hard to like fully account for both. And while you can do it, there's like the added layer of I think that Vincent is actually like strong enough to be a good deck now with Deep Recesses of Evil from Compendium, the banish a card from your graveyard of your choice. So you basically just get your best blood debt, like a call or something like this, or a Deathly Way, whatever you want, really. But with Vincent doing well, a lot of these decks have started playing Ripple Away. And Ripple Away is such a beating for Vincent. Because you finally get everything to come together on your big turn where you're going to push like multiple chain links and go over the top. And if they ripple you, your turn usually falls apart because your malefics, your deathly whales all make 1 less. And then you essentially like don't have the resources to pay for your cards, right? Because all your cards cost rune chance. And then you kind of have to like take a bunch of blood debt, set up again. If you have like Mordred Tide, you can push through, but that's just like one more thing that needs to line up, right? And I think this is a problem with Vincent is when everything works, the deck is very powerful, but there's a lot of games where not everything is working how you want it to.
That would make sense. I guess like the larger the tournament is, the harder Vincent it is for it to come together that many times in a row to kind of like win the tournament too, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think across so many rounds, it becomes quite difficult. And I think I do think Ripple Away is a very big problem for that deck. I think if Ripple Away wasn't around, I suspect we would see a little more Vincent doing well. But that card is just so potent against Vincent and a few other heroes. It's also relevant against. So it's a card that's been seeing quite a bit of play in the defensive decks. Is very strong.
I agree. I agree. If we don't have Ripple right now, we will never beat that deck. So, I'm glad that that card exists. Okay. Did you want to talk about Puffin a little bit? Do we know anything about this Puffin deck? We know that there is a deck list posted on the FabTCG website of one of the winners. No, this is the one that's posted on FabTCG on the front page is the Ireland list that got first place this weekend. I am not that knowledgeable about the Puffin deck. It does not look anything special. Like we see the cheating scoundrels, we see all of the high seas like majestics that Puffin got, and it seems like the gear turner that got printed recently. And other than that, it's just like it just looks like a classic Puffin list. What makes this deck like a little bit more potent than it was maybe in the past?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. So this deck is kind of what I would have expected the decks to look like. I haven't done like a full review of all the lists that topped, but the Puffin decks that I've seen on stream, seen people talking about, is this kind of pirate Puffin deck that is mid-rangey. For a while, decks were experimenting with boosting and playing all mechanologist cards. These decks these days are not boosting and are playing still a lot of mech cards, but also D-Reacts, Cheating Scoundrels, some of the pirate cards, and often some strong generics. Like this deck has Enlightened Strike. I've seen some decks with Command and Conquer, things like this. I think there's a few things going for Puffin. One is she's just gotten a few good upgrades, kind of like set after set. There was Backspin Thrust, the untap a cog card. There's Cheating Scoundrel, which you mentioned, that helps with her gold economy. There's Gear Turner, which is a 1 for 5 on hit. You get a cog from your deck. So you basically get to get a copper cog. And then in addition to these, there's also Crash Site Salvage from Omens. It's the 0 for 3, block 3, yellow scrap card. And when it attacks, if it scrapped a card, it gets go again. And if a cog was scrapped, create a gold. Just like more and more cards that support her gold engine and help her manage her cogs without having to fill the deck with like 12 copper cogs like we saw sometimes in the past. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like just slowly getting more and more support for this archetype. And then in addition to this, Puffin has some very nasty on hits. Cogworks Zeppelin, when it hits, you get to make a cog. You can crank that cog, so it's usually an action point. It can also be a card if you've cranked twice. Cogworks Dovetail, it's like a 1 for 7 go again, untap your cogs if you have 3 cogs. Kind of crazy. Gear Turner is a 1 for 5. You get an action point if it hits, and a cog. And again, you can potentially crank 2 times, get that card. So I think that Puffin is really good at punishing these decks that don't really want to block, while also having access to a pretty big fridge, the ability to play a bunch of D-Reacts if she wants to, and the ability to slot in Disruption. This particular deck doesn't look like it went that way, but I have seen decks with like CNC and stuff like that. So I think she's quite good into the aggro decks, basically.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, the way that you talk about it is kind of gross, right? Like all of these are basically 1 for 5 on hit go again, and so like you have to cover it up. But they also have like the instant abilities of like, pumping themselves with the cogs you have on board. So like, how much do you actually block? If you block for 6, they pump it over. If you don't block for enough, they just let it hit and they make a cog for free, and that might be drawing a card too. So yeah, I guess this deck is like really good at kind of like converting the 1 for 5 go again, 2 for 6 on hit go again. So they're like pretty fair value until you kind of like think that it's basically a snatch on all these cards too, right?
Yeah. And then like the Spitfires, like if they have a cog, they get a free 2 or 3 cost attack in there as well. So it's kind of like a lot of small things for Puffin. But I think if she's getting her on hit, she's very efficient. And then the decks that block really good are the decks she struggles more against because it denies so much of her value.
Okay, so I guess now that Victor is gone, that must be one of her worst matchups, right?
I think so. I don't know if Jarl is better. Jarl might be worse because Jarl has a lot of defense reactions and like the Earth Pool. So I could see Jarl potentially being even worse for Puffin, but this is just like purely theoretical. I do not know very much about the Jarl Puffin matchup. I don't think I know anything about the Jarl Puffin matchup. I remember people saying it was bad like before, but it's long enough ago that I don't know how relevant that information is.
This deck does play a lot of blues though, and it does have enough blues, so maybe it's not as bad as like Syndra going into Jarl.
Yeah, I I could see it. Yeah, it's really a matter of if you can beat the fatigue in game, but yeah. Anyways, it's puffin.
Okay.
Um,
Is there any other decks that you wanted to talk about that kind of did well before we just like talk about what living legend during the net season?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of covered most of the decks. There are a bunch of other heroes that have one win or had some okay conversion, like the Kasais, the Fais, the Katsus, the Iras, the Teklos. Even Reinar had quite a few top eights. So there are other decks out there in the format, but they're lower representation. And I think we can just move on and talk about, I guess, Living Legend first. Prism LL'd, of course, in the middle of the season. And with the final week, Victor also achieved Living Legend status and is now gone. So all the Nationals data we have is definitely the starting point for the format, but it is a different format because Prism and especially Victor are no longer in the format. And then there's also some BNRs, which we'll talk about momentarily. But I think Victor leaving is kind of the big one. What do you think the impacts of Victor leaving is?
I think we talked about quite a bit of this already, but definitely there's gonna be more mid-rangey decks that want to play smaller hands, attack every turn, and then block with the other cards. We haven't really seen decks that do that anymore. Because like Victor it was a huge issue, and like it still didn't have like a great matchup into the aggro list. So like that kind of deck just struggled into the whole metagame. Whereas now that Victor leaves, the mid-range decks are typically really strong into these, guardian style decks. So I'm very happy to see Victor leave so we can actually maybe see a little bit more of these like, block out and attack decks. Like, I'm thinking maybe even Aurora might be a deck that might start performing once she has her on hits, be more relevant, and if she can block as well. So like I'm pretty excited to see some of these like mid-rangey decks come back once Victor leaves. I'm also very happy Victor leaving because my Huntsman list becomes significantly better once this deck leaves. I have already removed like 6 cards out of my deck that was specifically in for Victor, and now all of these cards can be slotted in for all of the other matchups, and it has been kind of like the happiest thing of my life, like Victor leaving, great. Prism leaving, great. I have like 9 extra cards I can put in my deck.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do think Victor was kind of a big gatekeeper. I think decks like your kind of mid-rangey Ira lists, they didn't really stand a chance against Victor, but they can grind out a Jarl pretty effectively with the Kodachis. So yeah, I think that that's like kind of a big change. Theoretically, Victor LLing is good for the aggro decks, but we've already seen Jarl rise up, and I think that Jarl is quite solid into a lot of these aggressive strategies. Your Katsus, your Dashios, your Syndras, your Asilios. Jarl has solid matchups, if not good ones, into basically all of these decks. So I don't know if that much changes for the aggro decks. Kind of remains to be seen. I think people need a little bit of time to try and solve that Jarl matchup and figure out what all of that looks like because it hasn't really been a focus. But yeah, it looks like that's kind of maybe the biggest thing is that the decks that want to go long don't have to compete with Remembrance and Golden Sun plus Visit the Gold Main Estate anymore.
The Visit the Goldmain Estate has been like a big issue, I feel like, in this game where it's a blue that essentially was like a 1 for 8, 1 for 9, 1 for 10 I've seen before. And, that's not a rate that I feel like that's not a rate that's okay in this game, like
And you draw a card too.
yeah, it also draws a card. Great. Yeah, it's a negative tier resource card that generates 10 points of damage. Amazing. Yeah, so like we're playing like really bad cards to try and beat this card, We're trying to play Gravekeeping into a Victor to try and banish it so they can't play it for the 4th time in a game. And that's not where that doesn't sound like a healthy place to be. But now that decks don't have to do this. I feel like we're gonna see a lot more brutes can now start blocking and do stuff. Is there even a brute in the format right now? Actually,
There's Reinar. Reinar is kind of the main brute.
oh, KO is gone.
There's also Leviah, but I think Reiner is the one that has been seeing the most play and results.
Oh, okay, okay, that makes sense. You know who I'm actually excited for the Victor once Victor is gone is Uzuri. I feel like Uzuri might come back.
Yeah, I could see it. I think Azuri might be a little bit too fair, but I could be wrong about that. She does have very good disruption. There are a lot of aggro decks, so yeah, maybe Azuri can get there.
Yeah, imagine trying to play against Uzuri nowadays. They have so much assassin stuff, and now we get Command and Conquer back, and we can do more things that don't just lose to the Test of Iron Grip.
It's true.
Honestly, just Test of Iron Grip being gone. It's not technically gone, but it basically is gone. Is kind of. I'm very glad. I'm very glad we don't have to play against that card anymore.
Yeah, the on your turn you discard is not great. I don't love it.
I think Victor needed that card for it to be like this like powerhouse that it is, but it wasn't great.
Yeah, it's kind of awful to play against.
What about Prism LLing? Do you have any thoughts on Prism LLing and how? Because like I feel like Prism LLing didn't really affect the format once
Yeah.
she left.
It's mostly just people don't have to consider if they want to put poppers in their deck for exactly Prism anymore. There's also maybe a little bit of hate, like sometimes people play Midas Touch for Prism, but you can still play it for Gravy. I think it was often largely for Gravy, and it also helped with Prism. So the biggest thing is I think people get a few sideboard slots back. That being said, you probably lose those sideboard slots to Acilio and having to have AB or answers to Arcane Acilio in your deck, if that's something you want to do. I'm curious if by the time we get to Pro Tour, that will change a little bit. I was really surprised at Canadian Nats, like how much Arcane Barrier, Oasis Respite I saw. I feel like my perception has been that, and from looking at the decks that have been posted on Fabry from the Nationals, is like overwhelmingly the attack action deck. I hardly saw the spell deck at all, but people are still teching quite hard for it. So yeah, I'm curious to see if that will continue as we go into PT.
I think the issue with the spell Acilio deck is that if you don't have these tech cards, for example, my Huntsman deck is like will be 0% into that deck if I don't have AB3.
Yeah. AB3 I can understand, but people are even going as far as like 3 Oasis Respites, and I was like, holy, like that's a lot.
Hey, Oasis Respite's good into other matchups, okay? Like I play that card into a lot of matchups.
That's fair. That's fair.
With a tunic counter, you know what that card does? It's basically a 0 for 4D react that gains a life. That's beautiful.
I can see it more in Huntsman. I've seen it in like Iras and like other decks too. There were decks that I would not expect to play Oasis Respite that were playing Oasis Respite, at least at Canadian Nationals. So
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the other format defining thing other than the Living Legend system, which will be the banned and restricted announcement that came out a couple of weeks ago now, but we haven't really talked about it until now. And 4 cards changed for the CC meta game. So 3 cards got unbanned, and I guess we'll just talk about each one separately. First one, Electromagnetic Somersault Blue, specifically the blue one got unbanned. This feels like an unbanning for Ziggy, right?
yeah, Ziggy's sort of the hero that is most likely to be able to leverage this. I don't know if this changes very much. I guess like assuming that the Ziggy lists that have been popular are still similar to the one that Jonathan Magnuson played at in US Nats and top aided with, there's not that many targets for this. And like you can include Phantasmaclasm. I've seen a lot of lists incorporate that card. And there are some strong things, but I think you might be a little bit light on targets for Electromagnetic Somersault Blue. And yes, you could shift the deck to try and do this, and maybe that's worth it. But yeah, the fragment cards have kind of fallen short, so there's not all that many blues you want. I think it's usually yellow and blue duality, and then like Phantasmaclasm as the 2+ cost cards that Ziggy wants to play.
And you don't think this is gonna like shift the deck so that people will start playing somersaults?
It could.
Because like
We'll have to see. It could.
because somersault technically is a 0 for 6 like block card, right? Like that's kind of what this card is here for. Is like you block with 2 cards, you somersault it, you bounce it back, and then now you can play those 2 cards again. And specifically the blue ones, like I guess like the The dream scenario is you block with like Phantasmaclasm, a blue 2 cost. You block for 6, and then you go somersault, pick it up, and you Phantasmaclasm them, right? So it's like a 3 card 15. It's technically a popper, but it's Phantasmaclasm, so it's probably gonna rip the popper away. That's a 3 card 15. Like, how do we say no to that? Like that seems really powerful.
It's definitely possible. Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I'm still kind of skeptical. I think there's like a couple things. Like one is that you need to have a link that you can block 6 on. A lot of these aggro decks are presenting like 4s, so it doesn't really help you there. Like you could do this into Jarl, but I think you're already very good into Jarl. So that's like one factor. And another one is the deck still typically wants to play, at least the way that we've seen it, it wants to play a lot of auras for Refractor and then to leverage Gone in a Flash. And in your aura heavy hands, this card is not good. You can pitch it, which is nice. You usually do want to pitch on these turns. But one of the problems that I think I had when I was playing the Ziggy deck was just kind of drawing these like super instant heavy hands that like force you to like play an aura, swing Refractor, do nothing else. And this kind of just feels like another card in that category. It's not an aura, but it is a blue instant, and you are playing a lot of instants that don't have block value. So it's kind of competing there, and those instants also all aren't targets for Somersault. So it's really a matter of like, can you fit enough targets into your resource base, into the rest of your deck to still have a function and not give up like too much. And I don't know, it's a strong card, but yeah, it's not like an easy include, I think.
Okay. So you think this is a pretty fair unbanning then?
I kind of think so. Yeah, I think like I don't know exactly how many targets you need for Somersault to feel like a powerhouse, but I suspect it's like in the 20 to 30 range to really feel good. Like let's see, my list at Yokohama Facilio deck was playing 6, 9, 12, 14, sometimes up to like 15, sometimes up to 17 targets. And the amount of times I blocked 2 cards in Somersault was pretty low, just in terms of like having two targets for it that I can block with and then somersault back. It doesn't come up that much. The card was primarily used either to cycle or pick up an attack and play the attack again. And that's with like 17 targets. So you need, I don't know, I would guess like 24 plus to really feel good would be my like gut feeling. But I don't know. I'm sure like Ziggy players will try this out. But yeah, you really need to have a density of it for the card to be doing what you want it to do, I would say.
Okay, that makes sense. Then we'll move on and talk about the next card. It's Skyward Serenade got unbanned. I was actually really surprised that this card got unbanned because this card got emergency banned before the set came out. And then now we see this card come back. And Skyward Serenade, as LSS has mentioned multiple times, this card is a misprint card, right? Technically. And it just got played as printed. This card is very, very powerful. Only currently playable in Aurora. So Aurora kind of didn't have like a great start in this metagame. Do you think Skyward Serenade is enough to bring Aurora back into the metagame?
I think it's possible. Aurora kind of had this problem of not. You kind of felt like you ran out of cards to fill your deck with, especially with she doesn't have access to the elemental card pool like the original Aurora did. The lightning flow stuff has turned out to mostly be kind of tough to make it work in a major way. And so you're kind of like this red line deck that plays some lightning cards and a bunch of generics, but lists were kind of scraping a little bit for playables. And I think that Serenade, not only being a lightning 0 for 4 go again that enables Scorpio, which is huge, but also effectively taking up 6 deck slots is really good for the deck, which is like a little bit of a weird thing to say. But yeah, I think just it will give you a lot more consistency with Scorpio, and Scorpio is a very powerful weapon. A 0 for 1 and 1 is great. So I don't know. I think it's possible. Aurora is a deck that is on my radar as a deck that could be good because you still have Arc Lightning, you still have strong things. The sword is still good. She definitely wasn't there without Serenade, but I think she just kind of needs a density of cards that are good enough and have go again to really make her pop off. And I don't know if Serenade quite gives her that, but it gets her closer.
I know that this deck currently doesn't really have a way to do like a big gun and a flash combo turn with Lightning Greaves that much. Do you think they'll move towards that if they can?
I think Aurora typically doesn't want to be quite as all in on Gone in a Flash as Acilio does, because since you can't discard an instant to draw a new card, the all instant hands are really, really punishing. That being said, I do think that we will see decks lean into Gone in a Flash. I think that Gone in a Flash is just one of the most powerful things you can be doing in the Lightning card pool. And you have a handful of very good instants. Discharge, uh, Sigil of Solace, of course, are both great cards that convert for 3 as instants, work very well with Somersault. You have Lightning Press, which I think will be in basically every Aurora deck. Not so much synergy with Somersault or with Gone in a Flash, but still an instant, still works. You can still bounce it. And you do have cards like Sigil of Voltaris or Arcanic Reproach in the blue base that you could play as instant. So I think that you can have maybe like a smaller Gone in a Flash package if you wanted to. I guess Burn Up Shock also, you can play the Shock half to bounce it, and it's like a 5-point card. So yeah, I think that you can incorporate a small Gone in a Flash package. Maybe especially in those slower matchups. I think in the fast matchups, often snaps is very good for consistency. But I could see if you needed to go over the top, having a solid Gone in a Flash turn somewhere being part of the equation.
I kind of forgot that Snapdragons was a card. Man, that card used to be like a staple in every single deck long, long time ago, and now we just don't see Snapdragons kind of like anywhere. Man, I kind of miss that card.
I think it's still good, but I think a lot of the aggro decks that are strong now have a better boot slot. The Draconic Ninjas have Dragon Scalar Flight Path, and then Assassins have either Black Text or Stalker Steps. And I guess like Katsu has Breezies. What else is there? Dash is going to play Achilles. Yeah, a lot of them just kind of have their own version of action point boots that is good.
Yeah, makes sense. And then the other half doesn't play 0 cost or 1 cost. So yeah, makes sense, but kind of miss this card, you know? I'm kind of happy to see this card back in the format.
Yeah, it's such a classic.
Okay, the next card is Talk a Big Game. Talk a Big Game hasn't we haven't seen this card in CC yet. Like it got banned, it got emergency banned before it kind of like maybe saw play in either Lyath or Pallades. Has anyone in your group or have you tested this card yet? Because we don't actually know how good this card is.
Yeah, I think it's still an open question. I think it's definitely a powerful blue in Lyath and in Aura Focus Pleiades, and maybe even something like a Betsy who has evasion. Basically, if you have evasion, I think you can consider playing Talk a Big Game. And I think a lot of times you'll probably be getting like 3-4 mites out of it, something like this, because they also have armor, things like this to help cover. But a blue block 3 that can be a 0 for 3 or 4 and potentially even more is really, really good. So I think this is definitely like a powerhouse blue for these decks. I'm a little bit skeptical that it's good enough to make them good. I think it's kind of like the thing that we see in reverse, where like often when you see a deck eat bans, you take away one of their good cards. The deck is usually still strong. I think strong decks in Fab are usually strong for like a multitude of reasons. It's not generally centered around one card. There's exceptions like Bonds of Agony and Slippy. I think that really did just basically dismantle the deck. But most of the time when you ban a good card, the deck is still good. It's just a little bit worse. We've seen this tons. Syndra, Verdance, Marionette, Gravy Bones. Lots of these heroes have eaten a ban and are still good. And I think the reverse is probably also true, where just giving the deck one more solid card, I don't think is probably enough to make them go from like not very good to good, if that makes sense. So I think it like improves them, but I'm not really sure that they'll be like real meta contenders. Talk a Big Game is good, but it's like not that. It's not a Codex. It's not a Bonds of Agony. It's not a, you know.
Yeah, I get it. I think though, next week when we see Talk a Big Game being played, when it's like immensely overrated, it will be insane, right? Like
yeah, there will be games where it's very good.
yeah, like if this card ever makes like 11 mites, the game's over on the spot.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's true. I think just like confidence is relatively hard to make, and often you aren't getting above an attack for like 12 ish. And if you attack for 12, it's confidence. You can name like six, five maybe if they have D reacts. So yeah, it has quite a bit of you. You have to have like a very large attack with confidence, with talk a big game. And if you do all of that, it probably will win you the game, but which is really good for a blue. But I just don't know how much it'll come up.
Do you think Reinar now plays this card to be like just all in on the high roll turns? Just be like, I'm gonna talk a big game on name 7, and I'm gonna intimidate your whole hand and do infinite damage to you.
It's possible. You do have the evasive piece. I
That'll be sweet.
That would be sweet. I don't know. I don't know if I believe in that, but maybe.
Yeah, because you can always play this before you play your Blood Rush fellow and then go off. Yeah, it's kind of looking kind of good.
It's possible. It's possible. There's just sort of the issue of like intimidating their whole hand usually takes your whole hand, and you have a full extra card to play out to get value. And then if they have armor, I think that's the other big thing is like armor, right? Like even Acilio has like 4 armor, so you take Acilio's full hand, or Acilio has all instants, let's say, but he has 4 armor there.
You know what though? Talk a big game does kind of feel like it might be a good card in the pitch stack. You know, they block with everything. They don't have anything left, and then you talk a big game for like 4. It's a good card.
It's a good card.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a fine card. It blocks for 3. It's a blue. It has some offensive power. Yeah, Guardians and Brutes will play this card, right? Like most likely.
I think Guardians will. I think Brutes is a little less clear to me, but we'll see. I'm very curious to see what Talk a Big Game will do. It's interesting that LSS thought they needed to ban it. I'm sure that was for a reason, and it's possible I'm just too low on this card. But yeah, so far a little skeptical that I think it's a very good card. I think it's a if you're a Lyath player, you're probably thrilled with this, and you should be. I just don't know if it makes you a top tier deck.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. This is the biggest banning ever. I'm so happy this card got banned, and it's Remembrance. Remembrance getting banned kind of like we needed this card banned long time ago for gameplay reasons of like I kind of hated how Remembrance shakes up the format in bad ways of like it gave the fatigue strategies like they gave the aggro decks a way to beat fatigue strategies sometimes, but then the best counterplay for the fatigue decks to beat Remembrance was to play Remembrance. And that just came down to how many remembrances each person brought into the deck. And that is not a fun way to determine who's going to be favored in a match. And I am very happy Remembrance got banned, so now I don't have to play that mini game with my deck construction.
I agree with that. I also think that we've kind of seen like maybe just like over time as we've gotten more and more cards, there's just these like cards that are power outliers, which is fine. I think the game needs power outliers. You need things that create powerful turns. But it starts becoming like playing against 3 of that card is one thing, but playing against 6, 9, 12 copies of that card because of Remembrance starts to get really, really old, really, really fast. Visit the Goldmane Estate is probably the biggest culprit. But also in that deck, just like getting Golden Sun repeatedly over and over again was a pain. Getting Clash of Bravado back and having to get your Ziggy deck gets Clash of Bravado 12 times over the course of the game, and like probably don't win that game. Jarl was playing it to recur Oaken Old, and in some of the matchup, your plan is just to Oaken Old them as many times as you can until they fall over. There's a lot of this where the games kind of get boiled down to play your really good card over and over and over again until the opponent can't win the game anymore. And I think that that's not, it doesn't feel good, right? Like you're just kind of just, I get to the end game and I just do the same turn again and again and again and again, and you can't beat it.
Even Conquer of the High Seas was a card that got played, I think, 9 times in one game during our Nats in top 8.
Yeah. So I think it's just sort of like, for some decks, it ended up being this like 1 or 2 card sideboard that you put in and it just lets you play your best threat over and over and over again to kind of like bludgeon people in the late game. And I think that was the big problem with this card. I think there were decks that I kind of liked its role in. Like I thought Katsu being able to get back, it's sort of similar being able to get back Bonds of Ancestry, but I think Katsu sort of needed it in the long matchups, and in the fast matchups has a real cost. So I think the way that some of the aggro decks leverage this was kind of interesting, but I think that there's just like enough issues overall with the card that I'm happy that it's banned as well.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly though, the biggest thing for me is that when I play Hunter or Hunted and then they play Remembrance, it's like it's so annoying. I'm just happy that a generic shuffle effect is gone from the deck. You know, it's just gone from the game. Very good, very good. Make them work for the shuffle.
Yeah, so I think Remembrance Ban is the big one. This hurts, of the existing decks that we've talked about, I think this hurts Gravy Bones the most. Gravy Bones have kind of leaned on 1 to 2 Remembrance to beat fatigue as a very, very good tool. Like you said, getting back Conquer is the most common one. Potentially even getting back like a Whaler when it dies, plus some Conquerors. Something like this is usually enough to close out the game. With that gone, I think Gravy needs to go back to the drawing board a little bit and figure out how to beat fatigue. That might look like multiple Whaler Humperdinks. That might look like red sloops coming back to push damage. But you really need to have a way to kind of push through. And it's going to cost you, I think, some more deck slots and a little more cost than just putting 1 or 2 yellows into your deck that you can, potentially like Golden Dipple away if you want to, or something like this. Remembrance was pretty low cost in Gravy, and I think, I think Gravy is the one that gets hurt the most by this ban.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Man, there's been so many Gravy hate cards recently, and like the rule changes for Gravy, and then now Remembrance is banned. Oh, if Gravy survives this banning and like still becomes like a tier, like a meta deck, I would be impressed by this deck.
Yeah, just how resilient it is. Yeah, I think the allies are fundamentally super good math. So as long as he has Sawbones, Rigor Mortis, Chum, Swabby, maybe Swabby Anka, there's just like so many good allies. As long as he has those cards, pretty strong.
Yeah, truth. Okay, then let's wrap up this episode with just talking about what we think is going to be good at PT Vegas. I am not actually qualified for PT Vegas, so I'll be playing the calling in Vegas. But after talking about all of the things we talked about today, what do you think are going to be like maybe the top 4 decks in going into PT Vegas?
The first one I think has to be Acilio. Acilio is the most winning deck. There's multiple versions of Acilio out there. And I think that Acilio is going to be at least the deck to beat. I don't actually know if I think Acilio is the best deck in the format, though. I think, for the reasons I mentioned before, Victor leaving is actually not good for Acilio. You were good into Victor. Victor was good into the aggro decks that were good into you. I think Jarl is actually a harder matchup for you than Victor. So I think Acilio's positioning gets a little bit worse. I also think that with the attack action deck being the one that I think really has had legs, that deck kind of relied on Remembrance as its end game to beat some of these fatigue strategies, and Remembrance is gone. So Acilio is also actually affected by this Remembrance ban and needs to find a way to overcome fatigue. I think I kind of know what that way is. I'll be posting it in my Acilio guide that's coming up. The deck I played at Nationals is a Gone in a Flash deck that has a very small package of Aether Flares and Future Sights, and plays the Amp Gloves, the Aether Bindings of the Third Age, to do like a big Aether Flare combo. So you kind of get to do a Gone in a Flash combo and an Aether Flare combo. And I think that's sort of the direction you'll need to go with Remembrance being gone. I think it also overall improves the deck, so I'll be posting that. But Jarl is still tricky, and I think Huntsman is still tricky for you, and the aggro decks are still scary. You don't really want to see Katsu or Syndra. So I'm not sure. Well, Acilio is very powerful. I don't know how many of the meta decks you actually want to play against, is what I would say.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. I guess Victor leaving the meta game is actually a net bad for Acilio than net good. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, then talking about the other decks, has to be Mario, right? Like Marionette has been a good deck kind of since forever now, and it's still good. Like nothing got hit, nothing changed. The Victor is gone. I'm not sure if Mario Victor matchup was like that doomed for Mario anyways, but it was definitely one of the harder matchups to navigate, and that is gone. So it's still gonna be a top tier deck.
Yeah, I think so. I think that Marionette had a little bit of a weak start, and people kind of wrote this deck off, thought, oh, maybe Marionette's not that good. Victor and Prism LLing are both really good for Marionette. And in the last week, Marionette picked up 4 Nationals wins. So really came back with a vengeance. And I think if you're looking at that first couple of weeks where Marionette was not converting and you think that's going to carry over to the PT, you might be in for a bit of a rude awakening. I think Mario is alive and well. I think there's an argument that this is just the best deck, the most well positioned. I'm considering Mario for the PT. We'll see. I think Marionette is really good right now. Yeah, you just kind of have game into most things. Gravy Bones is still a little tough, but I think most of the other stuff you're good to equal into.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I think Jarl is definitely going to be a top tier deck. It's just going to replace Victor, right? In the spot of the metagame of being the defensive guardian. And Jarl over the years has been kind of like getting better and better and better. And now we have, a lot of different variants of Jarl that could be that they could be presenting. And you really don't know what type of Jarl they're gonna be or what the actual game plan that they're going to execute into you. If they're gonna be like a full fatigue Jarl deck that are trying to block you out, are they going to be an aggressive Jarl deck that's gonna be playing a bunch of fellings and um what is the other card called?
Plow Hunter.
Plow Under, yes. Um as well as just Oakenolds and things like E Strike, just an aggro deck, Mangles, all of those things. Yarrow is going to be definitely a tough deck to kind of figure out what they're trying to do, and then the faster you figure it out, the better it is going to be for you.
Yeah, agreed with that. I think Jarl's been like sort of on the fringes for quite some time. We had Verdance and Florian kind of occupying that Earth role, but just doing a better job of it. And then Victor kind of doing a better job of being the defensive deck. But I think it is now Jarl's time. And I think with those matchups out of the way, you're left with a lot of the matchups that Jarl actually is pretty good into. So yeah, I've been pretty impressed by these Jarl decks, and I think you kind of said it already, but just it's the last deck in the format that gets to play Felling of the Crown and Plow Under, and you also get access to Great Armor. You get access to Stalagmite, which is really good. You get access to Oakenold and some ice cards for Disruption, which we're in a red line aggro meta. Yeah, I think Jarl has a lot of tools to be very, very strong right now. And matchups like Gravy Bones are better than ever. Remembrance is gone. You have ways to blow up their compass and make the game harder for them. And I think between all of those, full powered Gravy back in the day did not have a problem with Jarl, but with where Gravy's at right now, this is not a matchup I spent a ton of time on, but I think it is much, much closer than it's ever been before.
And then the last deck on this list is Syndra. Yeah, it's a good aggro deck. Has flick knives, has daggers. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, you're pretty good into the other aggro decks. I think you're just pretty good into most of the decks that we've talked about. Like if you have DBX, you can be good into Mario. You're actively good into Acilio. The Jarl matchup's one that I want to investigate. There's a possibility I play Syndra, but yeah, I'm curious what the Jarl matchup is like. Stalagmite very good against you, but you're also very efficient. Yeah, I haven't played this since like the Fatigue Jarl days. I think Syndra's pretty good into Fatigue Jarl. I don't know what it's like into the other builds, basically.
If they're just trying to kill you.
Yeah, that sounds like it might be scarier. Frostbites are really bad for Syndra.
Yeah, they just like felling you, or they play an ice card and then they attack you, and they just like pressure your life total. Yeah, it seems pretty good at the Syndra.
Yeah, in theory, it sounds like a bad matchup, but yeah, I have not played it. But yeah, I think Syndra's done solid. Victor and Prism leaving is good for Syndra. Yeah, not much else to say.
Fair enough. Okay, then we'll talk about some of the other meta decks. We've talked about it enough, but I think Gravy Bone's going to be a meta deck. You're going to be seeing it at PT Vegas. You're going to be seeing it at Calling Vegas. I think we talked about enough of that deck. I think right underneath that would be Kasai. Kasai is really good into Gravy Bones, and it has like a reasonable matchup spread across the field, but it doesn't actually hit that top tier status, right? Like it always it feels just slightly under rate from everyone else, but then it's like just it feels like it's just on rate all the time, which is like not bad, but it's like Man, I wish we had a little bit more with Kasai.
I think Kasai is really good math. It's just a little bit fair. The biggest strike against Kasai for me would be that I think your Acilio matchup is quite poor. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Acilio be the most repped. So that's a little bit tough. I think a lot of the other stuff you're pretty good into. Mario's a tough but winnable. I think you're a little favored into Syndra. I would imagine you're good into Jarl. The army seems hard for them to deal with. I haven't played this matchup, but I would imagine so. You're good into Gravy. So you have some strengths, but you also have some weaknesses. I think a lot of these decks are like this, though. Most of them have bad matchups somewhere. But yeah, Kasai's reasonable. It's just whether you want to have a weak matchup into what is potentially the most rep deck. That would be the biggest reservation I have about Kasai.
Okay, that makes sense. We've talked about Vincent already earlier in the episode. Nothing really changes about this deck, right? It's just gonna be a reasonable deck, but you just kind of need to draw reasonably well or really well depending on your matchup. So, if you kind of just are okay with losing some games due to some bad draws, I feel like Vincent's gonna be a good deck. Definitely a meta deck, right?
I think so. I think on the lower end of representation of the meta decks, but I still expect to see some Vinsets, and it's a hero that, with whatever hero I take, I want to make sure I have some reps and a game plan into. I think Victor leaving is probably good for this deck. I'm not sure that Jarl is like so good for you, but what I will say is Clash of Bravado was a huge pain. So not having to deal with Clash of Bravado is good.
Talking about Clash of Bravado, Ziggy also a meta deck. I feel like the representation is going to be low on this deck as well, but definitely a hero you're probably going to see. You might play one at the PT. You'll probably play one at the calling. Yeah, Ziggy proves itself to be a real deck in this game.
Yep. And I think Victor leaving is pretty big for the deck. You're good into Mario. You're solid into Acilio. I imagine you're good into Jarl. It's like Syndra and Gravy that you don't really want to see, but like we said, everybody has someone they don't want to see. So yeah, I think Ziggy's actually in a pretty good position. I expect Ziggy to be better positioned than before.
And I feel like you put this last hero, on every list that we talk about, but I don't think we see it often. It's Dash.io. Do you think Dash.io will be good this time?
I think Dash.io is just such a powerful, aggressive deck that beats other aggro decks for the most part. And I think it will continue to occupy that slot. Dash.io is this weird deck where I think it's like hard to play. Some of the defensive matchups are hard. Victor going is good for you, but I think Jarl is kind of just as bad. That's kind of the big matchup you don't want to see, but you're good into most other stuff. And I think Dash.io will still continue to occupy the spot of like, it'll be around, it will win some events here and there. If it top eights, if it wins, it's not crazy, but it's not going to be like the most repped either. I feel like she's just kind of picked up, a few wins, a few points each season, and is gradually getting closer and closer to LL. She's at 875 now, picking up 45 points in nationals, and she's just been kind of doing this. It's like she's a deck, you're going to see it. She's going to win some events. Nobody's surprised to see her win events or make top 8 or make finals. And yeah, I think it's going to continue to be the case. She is just a solid contender.
Okay. Then, so that's it for our meta decks that we have here. And the last little section here is Dark Horses. Okay, I think Huntsman is actually really, really good now once that Victor leaves. I think there's going to be a couple of people, including myself, that will be playing Huntsman. And I think it is going to be doing pretty well into this current meta game. Even at Canadian Nats, even at the Battlegrounds, didn't feel like there was any like games or matchup where it felt like completely doomed, except for the Victor matchup. So all of these games are going to be very close, and it's going to come down to like 1 or 2 points every single game. But I think Huntsman has kind of all the tools it needs to beat every deck in the current metagame, which is kind of something we didn't have until the existence of Unmakes, which is the new stealth card that got printed, that when it attacks a hero, you can flip an ally, or if it hits an ally, it just immediately kills it. So with that new card, our Gravy Bow matchup has improved drastically. And then now that Victor is gone and now that Remembrance is gone, all of our other matchups that we used to kind of like struggle against because of the existence of Remembrance disappears. And now all of these decks have to kind of figure out a way to beat a classic fatigue style deck without the existence of remembrance. And I think that might give Huntsman a pretty big edge going into the PT and going into the calling. I think if you do have something, you can kind of expect Huntsman to know about it and that they're going to do something to try and disrupt that too. So I would be pretty wary if someone brings a Huntsman and if they look prepared. That would probably be kind of scary for you right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think Huntsman seems very strong right now. I was close to moving into meta decks. Jay pointed out its representation at Nationals wasn't that high, so we put it in Dark Horses. I think Huntsman's going to be very good. Yeah, guess you don't want to see Vincent. It's kind of the main one, right?
Vincent was fine. We have ripple aways. We have ways to make it annoying for them. It is not our best matchup, but we have more tools than not to actually like to make it annoying for our opponents. And then because we have more space in the sideboard, we get to play cards like looking for a scrap and actually put pressure on Vincent before they set up, which is which has been a very very good addition to the decks for like the E strikes, the looking for a scrap. If you're playing the classic aggro huntsman lists that Pablo used to play, those lists are pretty like reasonable into min set now too. So like I think huntsman just being able to put actual pressure into decks that want to set up is good, and it can fatigue all of the defense like the aggro decks is also very good. So I think Huntsman's a good deck. I think Huntsman's a I can finally say I think Huntsman's gonna be a good deck finally after however many years.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think Huntsman seems really good right now. Let's go on to the next one, Katsu. We talked about Katsu having one of the highest conversion rates, even though it was a low sample size. And Katsu is really good against decks that don't want to block. You can push out an incredible amount of damage with some of the bonds lines. We've seen Katsu do this on streams across different events for a little while now, I feel like. Nia had a top 8 on in Columbus, and since then I feel like I've seen Katsus here and there, some different builds out there, but yeah, they all do kind of the same thing. They do a big bonds turn, they lynx you, they blow you up. And we've been talking about how many of these decks are aggressive decks or decks that don't want to block, like Acilio, like Syndra. You're very good into those. You're also good into Gravy Bones. So yeah, Katsu is if you play against mostly aggro decks, you'll do great. If you play up against a bunch of Jarls and Kasais, it gets harder.
Yeah, goodbye.
Huntsmans, yeah. So you're a bit of a meta call. I think you want to play the other aggro decks. Don't play too many of the blocky decks. Not that you don't have tools into them. I think that you do, especially with shurikens and wind cutters and the new card that lets you put a shuriken to the bottom. I think those matchups are closer than they've been. But the real reason to bring Katsu is the other aggro decks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Surprisingly, Katsu's not a good matchup for Huntsman, but yeah, that aside. Aurora is going to be the other dark horse that I put down. With Skyward Serenade getting unbanned, it could technically play Electromagnetic Somersault Blues. I don't know if it will. It probably won't. But these cards getting unbanned is a big upside for Aurora. And Aurora did feel like it was kind of like missing a couple of cards. But Skyward Serenade is a couple of cards. So we can probably expect Aurora to have a little bit more fighting power than it has before. And Victor was not a good matchup for it, right? Like, there's no way Victor was bad into Aurora. So it lost Victor. And this is the current new Aurora is kind of a list that can play blues, so it will have some game into Yarrow as well. So I'll be pretty excited to see maybe even something like a mid-range Aurora or an aggro Aurora list coming up, and making a mark this weekend coming up. And I'll be pretty excited to see if there's any Auroras that can actually keep up with the current top tier decks.
I think this is maybe the most speculative one on our list, but yeah, worth taking a look at. So yeah, that's going to wrap us up There are, of course, other decks in the format that are playable, that are solid. We touched on a lot of those throughout the results, your Iras, your Puffins, decks that you will expect to see. We didn't cover everything, but these are kind of our main predictions as like the biggest, most represented decks for PT Vegas. Let us know if you agree with that or there's decks that we missed. We'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us and let us know on social media. Jay is at Ueda J on Twitter. I'm at Yukili Bender on Twitter, and I'm also at Yukili Bender on Blue Sky. Or you can get in touch with us through the Patreon Discord that's available to all patrons at patreon.com/onthebobble. But yeah, I think that's going to be a wrap for this week. And if you're playing in Vegas, good luck. See you there. And if not, good luck in the events that you have coming up. And we'll see you all next week.
Sign off. Okay. Going back to like can nets a little bit. You know what I think actually was like a thing that I didn't do day 2 of can nets that I might have affected me. I don't know if it's true or not. I didn't have coffee that morning.
Could be. Do you usually have coffee before?
I have coffee every single day.
Oh yeah, that's. I would not be surprised if that was the problem.
Like maybe I just needed like a caffeine pill or something to just like.
Or just go get a coffee.
Yeah, we're gonna go get a coffee. I really should have, but the weird issue is because I had like a full 8 hours of sleep the day before, I didn't feel tired.
Sure. Yeah.
It's such a weird feeling. Like I slept for 8 hours and I felt like I played worse.
Yeah, I think it's likely the coffee. I think building a routine for events is really helpful. And if you're used to having a coffee, you're used to having breakfast, have a breakfast and a coffee. If you don't usually eat breakfast, you probably don't need to eat breakfast. You can experiment with this, of course, but I think usually sticking to what you normally do is a good starting point for events. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the no coffee made you like just a little less alert or whatever.
Okay, so you're right. So I had breakfast that morning because Nia's grandma made me some food, and I didn't have coffee. And I usually don't have breakfast. Double whammy.
It's possible, yeah. I know some people also like don't normally eat breakfast, but like breakfast for before events because it's a long day. So not to say you have to do everything the same, but
but I think coffee does affect me in a specific way that I should have had just went to McDonald's or Tim Hortons across the street to have a nice coffee.
You know what's kind of funny?
What's up?
I do think that part of my problem in day 2 of Nats, or sorry, in day 1 of Nats for the draft was not having enough sleep. I think the other problem was that I should have got coffee as soon as round 4 ended and they were setting up for draft, and I didn't get coffee. And I think, I don't know, like it's hard to say because like I was just tired from not sleeping and coffee doesn't fix that. But I do think if I had coffee, it might have helped. So I might have also thrown by not getting coffee when I was supposed to. I think managing your like energy levels and having the right amount of food and caffeine and water is important.
Makes sense. Yeah. I threw a game in. I threw a pick in the draft portion of Canned Nats. I was really sad about that. I don't even think it was like that bad of a pick in my draft, but I think if I just picked the right card, pack 3, pick 7 or something, pack 3, pick 6 or something like that. I think I win one more match.
Yeah.
Stuff like that happens. So
draft's hard. I think I made a bad pick too.
Yeah.
My bad pick was picking up Ziggy cards. I'm like half joking, but I'm half not joking. I think I just kind of had this experience of like my opening packs were weak. I had Flittering Spike and Star World Warning as my first 2 picks, which is like not really where I want to be, but like the packs were just garbage. I think it was like Fingers of Fragmentation and one of the packs. I'm like, I'd rather just take Flittering Spike. And then the other one, I think there was like kind of literally nothing. And I was like, okay, I'll take Star World Warning. And then it was sort of like I could be Ziggy or Aurora. And I think where I'm at is if I can be Ziggy or another hero, I'm just going to be the other hero. I think I got a little baited because I'm like, Flittering Spike and Star World Warning are so much better in Ziggy than Aurora, which is true. And I think that Ziggy was super reasonable for my seat, but then it ended up being 3 Ziggy Pod, and 3 Ziggy Pods are not always great. I think I could have done better. I think I didn't necessarily have to be a 1-2 draft, but it was not really the draft you're hoping to have. And yeah, for Vegas, I might just bias away from Ziggy unless I'm getting past like rares.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. My mistake on the pick was actually a Lace Lightning in pack 3, pick 6. I got past a Lace Lightning. In the same pack is I think it's called Comet Collision, the 0 for 3,
Mm-hmm.
Starfall for 4. And at this point, I'm just like, I want one more red spell. Like, I think that would make my deck really good, but I don't have a leg piece yet, and like my only attack is like a yellow Heaven's Claw or something. And I should just pick this leg piece. Like, it's pack 3, pick 6. I'm not getting another leg piece. I should just pick this. It makes my Acilio mirror that much better, right? Like, it's worth so much in the Acilio mirror. And it kind
Yeah.
of pads my life total for the going second into some matchups. So it's just like I should have just picked this card, and then I didn't because pack 3, pick 6. There isn't actually that much time for you to think about your picks, right? Like I think you have 30 seconds total,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like by the time when they said draft, I picked a card, and I'm just like I didn't pick the Lace Lightning, and then I regretted immediately after. Like the next I picked up the next pack and just regretted not having a Lace Lightning. Don't see another leg piece, so obviously it's just like I'm a 2 equipment deck now. Could have been a 3 equipment deck, and I had cards that it's not like I was like struggling for playables at that point. So ah.
Yeah.
If I had like one attack in my deck that was reasonable, I would have like snapped it off. But not having the attack portion was just like this card's not that good if I don't have attacks, and I was just like, just kind of baited myself to not pick this equipment. That's just essentially an extra point of life in the Cilio Mirror. Yeah, that's what it is, though.
Yeah. It's what it is. It happens. I think my problem was picking up. Wait. I might be getting mixed up. You know what? Never mind. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. We'll just cut it off here then. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Goodbye.
Have a good one.